Alex, your little fiancée is here to check up on you again. She's really clingy, isn't she? Afraid her phoenix might fly away. Yeah, might as well tie him to her waist. Don't say that. Look, her face is already turning red from embarrassment. Serena looked up at the graceful girl they were teasing. Her name was Vivian Yao. With her jet black hair, snow-white skin, and slender figure, she exuded elegance. Her smile was sweet and pure, making her the undisputed goddess of the architecture department. In my previous life, she was the woman Alex could never forget, the one he spent his entire life pursuing. In that moment, it hit me. I had been reborn. I was back before the wedding, at the time when Alex had taken leave from work to prepare for our marriage. Vivian Yao was the very person he brought back as his true love in my past life. Alex looked at me with a faint smile. Are you here for Alex? He's coming down in a minute. As I stood there under the sunlight, momentarily lost in thought, Alex appeared with his usual cold expression. What are you doing here again? He asked, cutting through the crowd and walking up to me. He grabbed my arm and pulled me to a quieter path nearby. I'm here for a gathering with my classmates, he said impatiently, adjusting his glasses. Do you have to follow me everywhere? His irritation was evident. Serena, the wedding is in 5 days. Can you give me these last 5 days of freedom? The branches overhead cast dappled shadows, and sunlight streamed through, creating shimmering patterns on his face. But his gaze held nothing but frosty indifference. I looked at the man in front of me, the man I had loved for 18 years in my previous life. Now, in his prime, he was handsome and dignified. Yet, who would have guessed how cold and cruel his heart truly was beneath that flawless exterior? I looked away and lowered my eyes, smiling faintly. I'm sorry, Alex. I won't bother you anymore. With that, I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm again. What's your problem now? I've already agreed to marry you. What more do you want? I turned to face him, shaking off his hand. He looked startled but quickly recovered, his expression filled with deeper contempt. Serena, if you keep this up, we might as well cancel the wedding. I took a deep breath, swallowing all the bitterness, resentment, and pain bubbling up inside me. In my past life, he treated me this way. This time, I make sure he felt it all back in kind. Softening my tone, I spoke with a hint of grievance in my eyes. I'm not causing trouble. I just wanted your opinion on some details for the wedding, so I came to ask. But before I could finish, he waved me off. I don't care. I've already told you. Do it however you like. All right. I won't bother you with the rest of the details, I replied quietly. Perhaps because I seemed so obedient and docile, or maybe because he felt a twinge of guilt. Alex suddenly reached out to ruffle my hair. All right. I'll come home early tonight for dinner, he said. I feigned delight. Okay, I'll wait for you. He chuckled lightly, but the smile faded as quickly as it appeared. Pretending not to notice, I walked away cheerfully. It wasn't until I was far, far away that I finally crouched under the shade of a tree and let the tears flow freely. That evening, Alex came home, but he wasn't alone. He brought Vivian Yao with him. In my past life, he had always hidden his feelings for her, and I was completely unaware of his affection for her. This time, before we were even married, he couldn't contain his growing desire for her. Vivian greeted everyone in Alex's family with a warm smile and handed out beautifully wrapped gifts. With her beauty, elegance, and grace, she looked perfect standing next to the refined and handsome Alex. I, on the other hand, felt like a complete outsider. At some point, she walked up to me, holding a gift. This is for you. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding with Alex. I accepted it graciously. Thank you. She seemed surprised by my reaction and pursed her lips, her smile dimming slightly. Serena, go help prepare dinner, Alex's mother said casually, as she had many times before. I put the gift down and raised my bandaged hand. I accidentally cut my hand this morning. I can't cook tonight. Alex's younger brother, Chris, rolled his eyes. Seriously? A little cut and you're out of commission? So spoiled. Alex's sister, Emily, chimed in. Yeah, you're just trying to slack off. Alex's mother glanced at me and chuckled. Well, She's about to be a bride. Brides are supposed to be delicate. I guess this old woman will have to handle the cooking tonight. Vivian quickly stepped in. Auntie, let me help you. How could I let you do that? You're a guest. It's no trouble at all, Vivian said sweetly. I'll just be your assistant. Soon, she came out carrying a dish. Serena, can you take this? I need to peel some onions for Auntie. She called me so naturally, as if I were her helper. I stood up to take the plate, but before my hand could touch it, the dish tipped over. Hot fish chunks spilled all over her, especially onto her bare legs, turning the skin an angry red in an instant. He exclaimed in shock, crouching down to clutch his reddened leg, tears welling up in his eyes. Serena, you did this on purpose, didn't you? Alex's fury exploded as he shoved me aside. I stumbled a few steps before falling to the ground. My palm landed squarely on the slimy fish pieces, and a sharp bone pierced my skin. My forehead slammed hard against the edge of the table. Alex carefully helped Vivian to her feet before turning to me with a frosty glare. Aren't you going to apologize to Vivian? Fighting through the pain, I swayed unsteadily as I stood. Blood dripped from my injured palm, staining the hem of my dress with vivid red splotches. Alex seemed to hesitate for a moment, but his expression quickly hardened, the coldness in his gaze deepening. Serena, apologize, he commanded. Alex, it's fine, Vivian interjected, gently tugging on his sleeve. I'm sure Serena didn't mean to drop the plate. Serena, didn't you hear me? Alex's voice sharpened. I told you to apologize to Vivian. What if I don't want to? I asked, meeting his icy gaze. Then I'll cancel the wedding immediately. Alex stood tall, looking down at me with a commanding presence. You know my temper, Serena. Once I say something, I won't take it back. Behind him, Vivian stood silently. When I glanced her way, her lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. I knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't trying to make me apologize. She wanted the wedding canceled. She didn't want to marry someone she didn't love. She wanted Alex. She had walked a long and winding road in my previous life, marrying someone else first before finally ending up with him. But I wouldn't let her have her way. All right, I said, biting my lip as tears brimmed in my eyes. My expression carried a mix of grievance and fear. I'll apologize. As the words left my mouth, Alex let out a barely perceptible sigh of relief, though his face quickly returned to its usual cold demeanor. Don't let this happen again, he warned, taking the first aid kit from Chris, his younger brother, and giving me a disdainful glance. The wedding is in just a few days. Behave yourself. I lowered my head, letting silent tears fall, my face a picture of timid remorse. Alex then turned his attention back to Vivian, carefully tending to her burns. Should we go to the hospital to make sure there won't be any scars? He asked, his tone soft and concerned. Wouldn't that be inconvenient? Serena might feel upset. Vivian replied hesitantly. Upset? Why would she be upset when she's the one who caused the trouble? Alex said coldly, throwing me another sharp glance. She causes problems and leaves me to clean up the mess. What right does she have to be upset? That night, Alex didn't return home. A text from an unfamiliar number appeared on my phone. He's worried about Vivian's injury and wants to stay with her tonight. You should rest early. Don't wait up for him. Bride-to-be. I thought bitterly. The text wasn't wrong. I should go to bed early. There were still plenty of things I needed to handle, like sorting out the old properties and shops my parents left behind, as well as finalizing my inheritance. The houses needed to be entrusted to a reliable agent for sale. Once all the inheritance was settled and liquidated, I'd take every last cent with me. I wouldn't leave a single penny for Alex's family. The day before the wedding, I had to try on the wedding gown for one final fitting. In my previous life, Alex had only briefly tried on his suit before leaving. This time, however, he stayed. Even after I finished trying on the main wedding dress, he remained seated on the sofa outside. When I stepped out in the gown, I caught a flicker of amazement in his eyes, though it quickly faded. The waist seems a bit loose, the stylist commented softly. It would look better if we tightened it slightly. Alex nodded in agreement. She used to have a smaller waist, Tighten it a bit more. But I shook my head. No need. It's more comfortable this way. Not like I'll actually be wearing it for long. I added under my breath. Alex stood and walked toward me, suddenly wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. You've grown up so much, he said with a nostalgic smile. I still remember when you first came to our house as a child, crying day and night. Now, look at you. A beautiful young woman. He lowered his head, his gaze filled with a rare tenderness. And tomorrow, we're getting married. Leaning closer, he seemed about to kiss me, but I raised my hand to stop him. There are people watching, I said, feigning shyness. Alex chuckled, clearly pleased. Fine. Then, we'll wait until the wedding night. His breath brushed against my ear as he whispered, I'll save it for then. I lowered my head, hiding the bitter smirk that played at the corners of my lips. The night before the wedding, tradition dictated that the bride and groom shouldn't see each other. With no family of my own, I stayed in a hotel. When Alex dropped me off, his phone rang. Judging by his distracted expression, it was probably Vivian calling. I deliberately looked hurt, my expression tinged with jealousy and sadness. Alex raised an eyebrow. Come on. Tomorrow's the wedding. Don't make a fuss over nothing. Just come pick me up early tomorrow, I said, tilting my face up to him, my eyes full of anticipation. Clearly flattered. Alex softened. I'll be there on time. Don't worry. With that, he left in a hurry. I immediately turned and went upstairs, checking my bank cards and account books one last time. I made a few calls to the real estate agents before finally taking a shower and going to bed. That night, I slept dreamlessly. Meanwhile, Alex seemed restless. He barely managed to nap as dawn approached. But when he did, he inexplicably dreamed of me in my wedding dress from yesterday. My every smile, movement, and gesture in the dream were graceful and captivating. In his inattentiveness, he suddenly realized that I had quietly transformed into a beautiful woman. I had a slender waist, fair skin, and though my figure wasn't as tall and delicate as Vivian's, it had a youthful fullness and softness. There was a tender charm to me that was distinct. For the first time, Alex found himself having absurd thoughts about someone he had always dismissed. When his phone rang, waking him up, he felt inexplicably irritable. He even considered delaying his plans, waiting until after the wedding night to leave. After all, he thought, I had loved him for so many years. Perhaps giving me that one night could count as a small reward for my devotion. But the voice on the other end of the phone quickly shattered his thoughts. What did you say? The bride is missing. Alex shot up from his seat, his grip on the phone tightening as his fingers began to tremble slightly. That's impossible. Did you check the wrong room? No, Mr. Carter. The voice on the line insisted. We didn't make a mistake. The front desk said the room was checked out 2 hours ago. Miss Serena's phone is also unreachable. The makeup artist is on the verge of tears. The words rang in Alex's ears like clanging metal, loud and jarring. It took him a moment to find his voice. I'll call her. Please wait a moment. But my phone was already disconnected. Alex frantically scrolled through his contact list, but he didn't know who to call. He had no way of reaching any of my friends or relatives. Despite all our years together, he knew nothing about me. He had always believed that I was entirely under his control, so much so that he couldn't fathom the idea of me leaving. Throwing on his clothes, Alex grabbed his keys and drove to the hotel himself. His nerves were frayed, and he ran 2 red lights on the way. Just as he neared the hotel, he tried calling me again, but my phone remained unreachable. His heart sank. Then, his phone buzzed. It was the makeup artist. Mr. Carter, we found the bride. It was a misunderstanding, the voice said, relief evident. Alex felt a massive weight lift off his chest, like a dense fog clearing away. He pulled over abruptly, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His voice trembled slightly as he asked, Say that again? We found her, the artist repeated. She said she felt uncomfortable last night and decided to switch rooms temporarily. The artist continued speaking, but Alex barely heard a word, leaning back against the seat. He suddenly laughed softly. He realized how ridiculous he had been. Of course, I wouldn't run. I loved him too deeply, too obsessively, to do something like that. The absurdity of his earlier panic struck him. What a joke. Before the wedding, Alex's family had consulted a fortune teller who had calculated our compatibility based on our birth dates. Due to certain taboos, Alex couldn't personally pick me up from the hotel. By the time the wedding procession returned to the venue, Alex was already dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, holding a bouquet of flowers and waiting at the entrance. When the groomsmen got out of the cars, their expressions were mixed, but none of them said a word. The bridesmaids, however, were conspicuously absent. I sat quietly in the car, my face veiled with white lace. Through the delicate fabric, only a faint outline of my features could be seen, a blurred hint of beauty. Alex hadn't expected to feel much excitement. Marrying me had always carried a trace of reluctance for him. Yet, when he saw the figure of the bride in the car, an inexplicable ripple stirred in his heart. The image of me in the wedding dress flashed in his mind, the way I had looked at him with gentle, loving eyes. Without realizing it, a faint warmth began to grow in him, softening his usual coldness. For Alex, alongside his career success, having a woman who had loved him unconditionally for years gave him a sense of pride and satisfaction. He stepped forward with the bouquet, walking slowly toward the car. The groomsmen exchanged glances, seeming hesitant to speak, but ultimately said nothing. When the car door opened, Alex extended his hand. "Serena," he said softly, his voice carrying an unusual hint of warmth. As my name left his lips, a subtle smile flickered in his eyes. The hand that emerged from under the lace veil was delicate and slender, its fingers encased in white gloves. When my hand lightly rested in his, Alex's grip tightened instinctively. But in that moment, a strange feeling stirred within him. This hand didn't feel like mine. My hand was softer, smaller. The hand fit perfectly in his palm. Just as Alex marveled at this, the bride stepped out of the car, her face hidden beneath the white veil, and glanced at him shyly. But in the instant their eyes met, Alex abruptly released her hand as if burned. The color drained from his face entirely, leaving a deathly pallor. A deafening silence settled around them. Vivian was the first to react. Her initial surprise quickly gave way to disbelief, and then to visible humiliation as her eyes reddened with unshed tears. The bouquet slipped from Alex's hands, tumbling to the ground. He turned sharply, grabbing someone nearby and rasping, "What is going on? Where is Serena? Didn't you go to the hotel to pick her up? How could you mistake someone else for her? What were you all thinking?" His voice grew louder, trembling with rage as he lost control of his emotions. "We don't know, Mr. Carter," one of the groomsmen stammered. "When we arrived, the only person in the room was Miss Vivian." "Yes," another chimed in. "We didn't see Serena at all." Alex spun around, his gaze locking on the makeup artist with an icy intensity. "Didn't you say the bride had been found? Is this your idea of found?" The makeup artist was on the verge of tears. "Mr. Carter, this isn't my fault. I was just following instructions. Miss Yao said she would take full responsibility for everything. I didn't dare question it. I'm just here to do my job." "Alex, it was my decision." Vivian stepped forward from the car, her back straight and her expression calm despite the tears threatening to spill from her reddened eyes. "Serena was nowhere to be found, and the wedding was about to start. I didn't want you to be embarrassed in front of everyone, so I came up with this plan. If you're angry, blame me, yell at me. It has nothing to do with anyone else." Her voice wavered slightly as she lowered her head, allowing a single tear to slide down her cheek. Then she looked up again and forced a small, trembling smile. "I did this because I care about you. Alex, maybe we can just go along with it? You've always had feelings for me, haven't you?" The murmurs of the crowd grew louder as Vivian's words seemed to find support among them. "She's right," someone said. "Vivian and Alex are a much better match than Serena ever was. Serena throwing a tantrum and disappearing before the wedding? She doesn't deserve him." "Exactly," another added. "Does Alex really need to beg her to come back? What kind of drama will she cause after they're married?" Vivian's tears fell freely now as she gazed at Alex, her eyes full of hope. Alex stood frozen for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned toward the crowd. Vivian looked stunning in the white wedding dress, And Alex couldn't deny that they shared a deep understanding and compatibility, spending so much time together. He had grown fond of her. But his heart knew that the woman he was supposed to marry was Serena. In his mind, he had already considered her his wife, even though he sometimes felt she didn't deserve him. He had intended to uphold the marriage contract, believing it was an obligation he could not shirk. He had decided to proceed with the wedding, even while keeping his upcoming departure a secret from Serena. He had planned to delay his plans for a few days, to give her a proper wedding and wedding night. Fate allowed. Perhaps they would even have a child, solidifying her place in the Carter family. Yet Serena had disappeared before the ceremony, throwing everything into chaos. Alex couldn't understand where she had found the audacity to challenge him like this. Was it because he had defended Vivian when she was burned, chastising Serena in the process? Did she think her parents' favor toward his family gave her the right to manipulate him? Anger bubbled up inside Alex like never before. For a fleeting moment, he considered going along with what the others were suggesting, marrying Vivian instead. But then his gaze fell on her again. Vivian was wearing the main wedding gown Serena had chosen, but it didn't fit her quite right. She was taller than Serena, and much thinner, leaving the bodice loose and the waist lacking Serena's soft curves. The memory of Serena in the dress yesterday resurfaced. Her figure had been delicate yet full, a vision of understated beauty. Serena's usual casual clothes had always hidden her charm, but seeing her like that had taken Alex's breath away. "Alex," Vivian called softly, breaking his reverie. Her voice was timid, almost pleading. Alex's expression darkened. Without a word, he reached up and tore the boutonniere from his chest, letting it fall to the ground. "I'm not feeling well," he said flatly. "The wedding is postponed." Without sparing a glance at anyone, not even Vivian, he turned and walked away. Vivian stood frozen in place, her face flushing crimson as the weight of everyone's stares bore down on her. Some looked at her with pity, others with disdain, but most seemed eager to see her humiliated. Her entire body trembled, her fingertips icy as her composure began to crumble. Never in her life had Vivian experienced such shame. Despite her modest upbringing, she had worked hard to earn her place at a prestigious university in the city. In the architecture department, she had always been the center of attention, adored by her peers. Even Alex, who had been aloof, had hovered around her like a devoted admirer. Yet today, in front of everyone, he had shattered her pride, leaving her utterly humiliated. Why? How could he do this to her? Vivian ripped the veil from her head, tears streaming down her face. She violently flung the veil onto the ground. It wasn't until I was seated on the departing plane that I finally exhaled a long breath of relief. As the aircraft ascended into the clouds, I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. The nightmare of my past life had come to an end, if only temporarily. At this moment, I didn't know what the road ahead would hold, but I was certain of one thing. After cutting ties with this ungrateful family, my future could only grow brighter. When I was 5, my parents died in an earthquake. In their last moments, they used all their strength to push Alex to safety, saving his life. Out of gratitude, his family took me in and arranged for me to marry Alex when we grew up, ensuring I would have stability in my life as I got older. However, that gratitude became something else entirely. As Alex's future grew brighter, I was reduced to nothing more than a pitiful hanger-on who had lucked out by being associated with the Carter family. When Alex went abroad for humanitarian work, he disappeared without a trace. During those years, I sold the house my parents had left me to pay for his mother's medical bills. For 5 long years, I cared for her while she battled her illness. Later, when Alex's younger siblings married, had children, and built their lives, I willingly handed over my inheritance to help them. When Emily, Alex's sister, got married, I provided her with $36,000 as part of her dowry. When she gave birth, I gave her another $6,000 as a gift. When her husband abused her, I stood by her, helping her seek justice, file for divorce, and even bringing her and her child back to their family home. But when Alex finally returned and wanted me gone, it was Emily who said, with a cold smile, "We've been taking care of you for over a decade. We've more than repaid the debt your parents left us. In fact, my brother sacrificed his chance at happiness for you. If you had any conscience, you'd step aside for my sister-in-law." When Alex brought Vivian back, it was their mother who happily accepted her into the family. She welcomed Alex's decision to oust me with open arms, fully supporting their relationship. For 10 years, Alex had secretly sent money to the Carter family while living abroad. During that time, he and Vivian had already been living together, raising children. Everyone in the Carter family knew about it except me. I had been left in the dark, used until there was nothing left to take, and then discarded like trash. In the end, I died alone and in misery, untreated and unloved. Thinking of all this now, I could only laugh bitterly. If my parents knew what had become of their sacrifice, would they regret saving Alex's life? I would never know the answer to that question. But in this new life, I no longer believed that kindness would always be rewarded. Meanwhile, Alex frantically called me over and over, but none of his calls went through. I had blocked and deleted every number from his family as well. First, his parents didn't take it seriously. "Alex, don't go looking for her," his mother said firmly. "What new bride makes such a fuss and plays such games? She's just testing you, trying to make you give in. We won't let her have her way." In their eyes, I was just an orphan girl, helpless and head over heels in love with Alex. Their pride and joy. They couldn't imagine that I would ever truly run away. They dismissed my actions as nothing more than a childish tantrum. But Alex remained by the window, unmoving. A sense of foreboding gripped him. He knew deep down that I wasn't throwing a tantrum or trying to manipulate him. I was truly angry. I truly didn't want to marry him anymore. He thought about the kiss I had avoided when trying on the wedding dress, the way I had quietly urged him to leave the hotel the night before. I no longer acted like the anxious girl who cried and clung to him at every little disruption. In the past, every woman around Alex had been a source of paranoia for me. My constant jealousy had been both flattering and suffocating to him. It was one of the reasons he had applied to work abroad, to escape me. He believed he had paid back his family's debt to mine. He felt no guilt in leaving me behind to pursue a life he truly wanted. What he hadn't expected was that I would be the one to leave first. "Wait," Emily suddenly said, breaking the silence. "What about my gold jewelry? You promised me that once she became part of the family, she'd buy me a whole set of gold. Now she's gone, and so is my jewelry." Alex's chest tightened. He remembered the inheritance my parents had left me: properties, shops, and a large amount of cash. Outwardly, it seemed the Carters had supported me all these years, but in truth, they had spent far more of my family's money than their own. Alex had been vaguely aware of this, but now it struck him more acutely than ever. I might have disappeared, but as long as the assets under my name remained untouched, it meant I hadn't truly left for good. He convinced himself it was only a temporary scare, that I was just trying to teach him a lesson. "Why are you so anxious?" Alex's mother said nonchalantly. "Wait until she lowers her head and comes back begging for forgiveness. When she does, you can ask for whatever you want." Emily pouted. "Who knows when she'll come back? What if she doesn't?" "Impossible," their mother scoffed. "You know how much she adores your brother. If it weren't for her devotion to him, I wouldn't have agreed to this marriage in the first place." Alex suddenly turned around and spoke coldly. "Mom, go find someone right now to check if Serena's properties are still in her name." His mother froze. "What do you mean by that, Alex?" "If the properties are still there," Alex said with a self-deprecating chuckle, "then it means she's just throwing a tantrum. If they're gone—" He didn't finish his sentence, but his meaning was clear. Realization dawned on his mother, and she couldn't stay seated. She rushed out, muttering, "I'll go find out right away. Her houses, her shops, those things can't be sold off so quickly." Emily, now in a panic, grabbed Alex's arm. "Brother, what are you saying? Do you think Serena actually ran away from the wedding?" Alex didn't respond, his expression cold. Emily stomped her foot. "I already told all my cousins about her. She really ran off. What about my jewelry? You promised me she'd buy me a whole set of gold when she joined the family. Now that she's gone, what happens to that? And how am I supposed to face everyone?" Alex sneered, his gaze sharp. Why are you so upset? Didn't you always say you didn't want her as your sister-in-law? Who doesn't want money? Emily muttered. Alex's cold smile widened. Exactly. Who doesn't want money? The Carter family looked down on Serena, but they clung to the engagement as if it were a lifeline. He realized now that he was no different. Serena had money but no family to protect her. She had loved him wholeheartedly, and by marrying her, her wealth naturally became part of the Carter family's assets. That had been his unspoken assurance when he applied to work abroad. He could leave without worrying about anything. Emily's petty and selfish behavior disgusted him, but deep down, he saw the same qualities in himself. Brother, what if she's really gone? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Alex's expression remained cold as he headed for the door. I don't know. What are we supposed to do? Emily wailed. Mom already paid the deposit for the new villa. Alex's laugh was icy. Whoever made the decision can pay for it. Without another word, he slammed the door, shutting out Emily's angry cries. I had left for a southern city I had always loved. Back when I was applying to colleges, I had followed Alex to Beijing, even though my dream school was elsewhere. Now, with the freedom and resources to make my own choices, I decided to fulfill the dream I had abandoned. I bought a cozy 2-bedroom apartment near the university I had once longed to attend. After settling in and taking 2 weeks to rest, I began preparing for graduate school. If I couldn't study there as an undergraduate, I'd do it as a graduate student. In my previous life, Alex had returned triumphantly from his work abroad, celebrated as a hero. He had married Vivian and moved into a new home, basking in the peak of his success. As for me, the city had been in full bloom, but I had arrived at the wrong time. This time, I would experience the spring for myself. 2 months after I had settled into my new life, Alex unexpectedly appeared. Spring was in full bloom. I had just left the university library when I spotted him standing outside. He looked thinner, but his presence still stood out among the crowd. Once, his mere gaze could make my heart race. Now, I felt nothing. Hugging my books close, I walked past him. Serena, he called softly. I stopped and turned to him, my expression indifferent, as though looking at a stranger. I've been looking for you, he said. Why? You're my fiancé. We're engaged. We're only engaged. Alex, we never registered the marriage. It's not legally binding. Alex's white shirt was pristine as always, and his glasses framed the face I had once loved so deeply. But now, none of it mattered. I've thought about it a lot since you left, he began. I realize I was wrong in how I handled things with Vivian. I admired her academic achievements, but there was never anything romantic between us. I've already spoken to her, and she left the country 2 weeks ago. She won't be coming back. I promise nothing like that will ever happen again. Come back with me. Serena, the wedding arrangements are still in place. We can hold the ceremony anytime you're ready. What makes you think I would go back with you? Is it because I used to love you? I smiled as I looked at him. Alex, haven't you realized it yet? From the moment I left, you became nothing to me. I know the past hurt you, Alex said, his tone softening. I've reflected on everything. Nothing ever happened between Vivian and me. I swear. Does that matter? I asked. Alex, I don't care about you and Vivian, because I stopped loving you a long time ago. That's impossible, he insisted. We grew up together. You've loved me for so many years. And yet, your love didn't stop you from secretly applying to leave for your overseas project. Planning to leave right after the wedding, did it? Alex's face went pale, his expression changing drastically. How do you know that? I know you were planning to leave with Vivian. If I hadn't stopped it, you two would have started a new life abroad. While I stayed behind, oblivious, I would have been left to fulfill your duties, care for your family, drain my inheritance, and be cast aside when there was nothing left of me. Isn't that right? He looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost, his face white with panic. But I didn't let him off the hook. I stepped closer, meeting his gaze head-on. If I'm right, your mother is gravely ill, isn't she? Alex instinctively took a step back. How do you know that? I chuckled coldly. I know your mother well enough to guess the timing. She must have just been diagnosed. and you're keeping it a secret out of pride. So tell me, Alex, did you come here to make amends? Or are you just looking for someone to care for your mother and use my inheritance to fill your family's bottomless pit? That's not fair, he said, his voice rising. How can you think that about us? My family raised you, supported you for over a decade. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Everything they took from me has already repaid their kindness. I said flatly, don't come looking for me again. Alex, I have no ties to your family anymore. And neither do I have anything left to say to you. I stepped past him, heading toward the campus gates. But he wasn't done. Serena, please, he called after me, his tone pleading. Think about it. Think about everything we've been through. Can you really just let it all go? I let it go a long time ago. I replied. You should, too. Instead of wasting time chasing after me, you should focus on earning more money. Your family has a lot of bills to pay. Serena, must you be this heartless? I laughed. Heartless? Alex, when your entire family schemed against me, where was your conscience? Where was your kindness? But we never actually hurt you, he argued. This is all just in your head. So what? I said, smirking. Even if it's just a possibility, I've killed it in the cradle. That's all. Alex took a deep breath. But Serena, we know each other. Can you guarantee the next person you marry won't take advantage of you? Who says I need to get married at all? I countered, amused. Alex lingered in the city for a week, hoping to convince me, but I eventually called the police, and he had no choice but to leave. Once he realized I was resolute, he stopped pestering me. Not long after, I passed my graduate school entrance exams. One day, a classmate from my hometown contacted me privately, telling me the Carter family's reputation had plummeted, and they were struggling to get by. More and more stories began to surface, how they had taken advantage of an orphan girl, showing no gratitude for her sacrifices. Alex's mother had become bedridden, her health deteriorating rapidly. Chris had turned to delinquency, landing himself in jail for several months. Emily, having failed to get into college, moved in with her boyfriend to avoid taking care of their mother. With mounting medical bills and penalties from breaking the villa contract, Alex had been drained of every penny he had saved. His old friends and classmates had distanced themselves, leaving him utterly alone. When I heard this, I couldn't help but smile. Without me to serve as their scapegoat, their days were truly difficult now. But what did their struggles have to do with me? I had a house, a car, and a comfortable bank account. I was free to enjoy my student life without a care in the world. Whether I met someone new or lived alone forever, I knew my life would be far better than anything I had endured with the Carters. The filthy swamp of their family could no longer disgust me. Years later, I heard that Alex had left his family behind to reunite with Vivian. The two of them settled in another city, where she gave birth to a son. They seemed to be doing well for a while. But it wasn't long before Alex returned to his hometown, alone and dejected. By then, the Carters had sold everything they owned, reduced to a shabby rental property. His parents, deprived of proper care, had passed away. Chris had fled to another country, getting involved in fraudulent schemes. And Alex? He was just a shadow of the man he used to be, burdened with the weight of a ruined family. His life was in shambles. Emily had married early and given birth to 3 children, but her husband was abusive, leaving her trapped in a cycle of violence. Alex lived alone in a dilapidated rental unit, spending his days drowning in alcohol. It turned out that Vivian's son wasn't his. She had only been with Alex to find a convenient father figure for her child. Once the boy grew up, and Alex had worked tirelessly to provide for them, Vivian reconnected with the child's biological father and left Alex behind without a second thought. I encountered Alex once when I returned to my hometown to visit my parents' graves. He was sitting on the roadside, disheveled and reeking of alcohol, despite being in his early 30s. His hair was already streaked with white, and he looked much older than his years. Passers-by avoided him with expressions of disgust. No one would have guessed that he was once the successful, admired Alex Carter. I didn't feel any pity for him. My sympathy for him had long since died. But I couldn't help feeling a faint sense of irony. When we were children, Alex had been kind to me, He was my hero back then. But we grew up, and everything changed. As I walked past him, I felt his gaze on me. He seemed to recognize me, springing to his feet with a sudden burst of energy. But then, as if ashamed, he turned his back and covered his face with his hands. I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge him. I simply walked past, my steps steady and unbroken, leaving him behind just as he had once left me. Another spring came, and the flowers were in full bloom once more. I wouldn't look back. I wouldn't forgive. I would simply keep walking, moving forward into the endless spring that belonged to me. Serena. In my previous life, my younger sister Emily and I received rewards from a system. She quickly chose $7 million, while I was left with the reward of scoring 700 points on the SAT. In the end, she squandered all her money within a few years and fell into crushing debt. Meanwhile, I graduated from Stanford University and earned an annual salary of over $1 million. After several unsuccessful attempts to borrow money from me, she pushed me off a rooftop. When we both reincarnated back to the time before the SAT. This time, she couldn't wait to choose the reward of 700 points, successfully got into Stanford, and even stole my politically connected boyfriend, Jake. Smirking, she told me, "Sorry, sis, your life is mine now." I laughed. A pig born in Rome is still a pig. Later, with the reward of $7 million in savings and as the state's top scorer, I was eagerly admitted into Stanford. The cold system voice echoed in my ears. Just like before, congratulations, host, for completing the system task. Please choose your reward. 1. 700 points on the SAT. 2. $7 million in savings. I struggled to look away from the options and noticed Emily's stunned expression across from me. The moment she snapped out of her daze, she blurted out, "I choose 700 points." A cold smile formed on her face. With a Stanford or Harvard degree, I'm not afraid I won't make $7 million. Task rewards have been delivered. She got her 700 points, while I received $7 million. Emily looked at me smugly and said, "Sis, this college diploma is way more valuable than your $7 million. I stayed silent, watching her arrogant expression. I knew she had also been reborn. In our previous lives, Emily and I faced the same system rewards. Back then, she chose $7 million, thinking, what's the point of 700 points? Even if you graduate from a top university, you'll still work for me. With her newfound wealth, she stopped studying, skipped classes, and splurged her money at bars, saying, I'm financially free, why bother studying? As expected, she failed the SAT. After traveling abroad to relax, she spiraled into reckless indulgence. Within a few years, the $7 million was gone, lacking any real skills. Her hollow soul couldn't support her inflated desires. She turned to loans, which snowballed into insurmountable debt. In the end, she turned her eyes toward me, who had an annual salary of over 7 figures. When I refused to help, she pushed me off a rooftop, raging, "Why do you get to live a successful life with 700 points while I'm drowning in debt? That score should have been mine. You stole my life." This time, however, she chose 700 points without hesitation. That night, I heard her laughing softly. "Sorry, sis, your life is mine now." Feigning sleep, I smirked inwardly. The system only gave her the 700 points, not the ability to achieve it. Does she really think a pig born in Rome isn't still a pig? With 6 months until the SAT, I used the foundation from my previous life and worked harder than ever, knowing she would score 700 points. Emily slacked off completely, often dismissing her poor mock exam results with, "These scores don't matter. I'm going to score 700 points on the actual exam." She scoffed at my efforts, saying, "Don't waste your energy. A community college would suit you just fine." She always believed my 700 points in our past life were solely due to the system. But the truth is, I never relied on the system. While she indulged herself, I studied relentlessly. Ironically, the system reward had even capped my score at exactly 700 points, when my self-estimated score was around 720. In this life, my goal was to be the state's top scorer. The SAT finally arrived. This time, without the system's interference. I was curious to see what I could achieve. After the exam, Emily bragged to everyone, "I'm going to score 700 points." Initially, no one believed her. But after comparing answers, people exclaimed, "Oh my God, Emily, you really might score 700 points this time. You've been hiding your true self all along. Beautiful. Smart. Your parents must be so proud." Emily smiled modestly, saying, "Scores don't mean much. Even if my sister Emma gets into a community college, she's still my big sister." Someone quickly chimed in, "With her usual grades, even getting into a second-tier college would be a miracle." The room erupted in laughter. Among the voices was Jake, my boyfriend, a handsome, high-achieving second-generation politician. Looking tenderly at Emily, he said, "Honestly, you're much better than your sister. I hope we both get into Stanford." Emily's gaze swept past him and landed on me, filled with smug satisfaction. That night, she blocked me at the door. "Sis, your boyfriend seems to like me more. He just confessed to me." "Really?" I replied indifferently. "Then he's yours." "Great. I won't hold back." Then, after all, Jake said he thinks I'm more perfect and likes me better. I smiled faintly. She really thought Jake was some perfect, high-quality guy. But I knew the truth deep down. He was a twisted psychopath. In my previous life, I discovered his true nature early and broke up with him. Unfortunately, another girl wasn't so lucky. On the night of her birthday, she fell from a building. The culprit? Her boyfriend, Jake. Of course, Emily, too busy enjoying her indulgent lifestyle, had no idea. But she wanted that kind of guy. I was more than happy to oblige. When the exam results were released, our parents gathered excitedly around Emily. My mom nervously asked Emily, "Are you really sure you can score 700 points?" "Of course," Emily said calmly, sipping her tea. "I'll definitely score 700 points. Don't worry." A few minutes later, Emily logged into the results portal. My mom's shriek pierced through the room. "It really is 700 points. Oh, my precious daughter. You've made us so proud." My dad was grinning ear to ear. "I knew it. My precious girl can do anything." Emily suddenly turned to me. "So, how many points did you get?" "Emma." At the mention of my name, the room instantly fell silent. My mom glanced at me dismissively. "If she can barely scrape into a second-tier college, I'll be thanking the heavens. All the tuition we paid for her went to waste. How much money has this family wasted on her all these years?" "Enough," my dad sighed. "Saying this now won't change anything. She's grown up. If she can get into a second-tier college, let her take out a student loan. If she doesn't, she can go find a job to help with the family's expenses." Emily, with an innocent look, turned to me and said, "Don't feel bad. Emma, there's more to life than just the SAT. Maybe mom can set you up with someone for a blind date in a few days. Getting married early might be a good option too." My mom patted Emily's head. "Emily's right. Let's not talk about this anymore. I'll go call the relatives to share the good news. Honey, check if there's availability at the city's best hotels for a celebration dinner." My dad nodded and rushed to look up phone numbers for the hotels, while Emily went out to meet Jake for a date. Left alone in the room, I opened the results portal on my laptop. Emma's results are under review. As expected, I had to keep waiting. That evening, while my parents were busy in the kitchen preparing a feast to celebrate Emily's success, the doorbell rang. Standing outside were several reporters. "Is this Emma's home?" one of them asked. My dad frowned. "Yes, it is. Did she cause some kind of trouble?" No, one of the reporters said with a wide smile. "We're here to interview the state's top scorer." "The state's top scorer?" My dad froze for a moment before quickly realizing. "Oh, you must mean Emily." Turning around, he called out loudly, "Emily, come here. Some people want to interview you." My mom hurriedly brought Emily over. "Emily, you're the state's top scorer? You've really made us proud. Unlike your sister." When relatives asked about her earlier, I didn't even know what to say. Emily smiled, the pride in her eyes almost overflowing. "I didn't expect to be this year's top scorer either." She was interrupted by one of the reporters. "Wait, isn't this Emma's house? This year's top scorer isn't Emily. It's Emma. My parents exchanged confused glances. Emma. My mom grabbed Emily's arm. Our Emily scored 700 points. Emma can barely score 400. If there's a top scorer, it must be Emily with her 700 points. The reporter seemed momentarily taken aback before responding with a polite smile. Your daughter Emily is certainly very talented, but we're here to interview the state's top scorer, Emma. She scored 738 points on the SAT. That's impossible. Emily couldn't hold back her outburst. How could she score over 700? You must be mistaken. It's not a mistake, the reporter said impatiently, turning to me. You must be Emma. Right. Before I could respond, the group of reporters swarmed around me. Emily was pushed aside, glaring at me with an expression identical to what I remembered from my previous life. But this time, she could only watch as I stood in the spotlight, smiling gracefully and answering every question with poise. The reporters then pulled my parents into the limelight, asking them about their experience raising the state's top scorer. My dad beamed with pride, unable to contain his smile. Honestly, we didn't do much. Emma has always been smart and hardworking. Even when she was little, relatives would say she'd surpass her sister one day. My mom, pretending to be affectionate, held my hand and said, My daughter is amazing in every way. She's just a bit too ambitious. Like me. In stark contrast to the lively scene, Emily stood in the corner, seething with rage. She glared at me until a reporter approached her. Emily quickly adjusted her expression, smoothing her hair and trying to look composed. Are you here to interview me? She asked hopefully. Yes, the reporter replied, extending the microphone. What's it like having such a brilliant sister? Does her success inspire you? Do you look up to her as a role model? Emily forced a strained smile, practically grinding her teeth. Yes, my sister has always been my role model. After the reporters left, my parents surrounded me. Emma, you're the state's top scorer. Why didn't you tell us earlier? Exactly. How could you hide such good news from us? What would you like to eat? Emma, Mom will cook anything for you. Unable to hold back, Emily interjected. I found out yesterday that Emma has $7 million in her bank account. I hope you haven't done anything illegal. Emma, $7 million? My mom's sharp voice cut through the air. Emma, where did you get that kind of money? I looked at Emily calmly. Even after 2 lifetimes, her tactics were still so immature. Investments, I said coolly, naming a couple of recent ventures. My parents, who had no concept of finance, looked at me in shock and awe. My mom had been a homemaker her entire life, and my dad was just a low-ranking clerk. They couldn't tell if I was lying or not. That's incredible. Emma, my mom exclaimed. Why didn't you tell us earlier? The family has been struggling lately. You should give us a few $1,000s to help out. I smiled. Of course. But most of the funds are tied up in new projects. Once the money is liquid, I'll give you and Dad each $100,000. My parents were instantly overjoyed. What a wonderful daughter we have. Meanwhile, Emily stomped her feet in frustration. Can't you see she's just making it up? What kind of investments? The money must be in her bank account. Why don't you just take the card and withdraw the money? Emily snapped. Enough. My dad shot her a stern look, then turned to me. Your sister is studying hard while earning money. She's working so hard already. Let it go. He sighed. Let's go out to celebrate your sister's success. Emily scowled, her face full of resentment. I'm not going. Then don't, my dad said sharply. We've spoiled you enough. The door slammed shut behind him, muffling the sound of Emily's angry shouts inside. 2 days later, Emily didn't come home for the night. She told my parents she was staying over at her classmate Tina's house, but she was lying. Tina was on vacation with her family in Hawaii. At 11 p.m., I came across a post on Emily's social media. Me and my moon. The picture showed her hand intertwined with someone else's on white bed sheets. Right after that, Jake sent me a text. Emma, let's break up. I smirked. Finally, he'd said it first. Under the dim light of my desk lamp, I typed back. Why? Jake, you know how much I love you. I don't agree to this breakup. Have you fallen for someone else? I sent the messages one by one. Finally, on the seventh message, his reply stopped, marked by a single exclamation point, indicating I'd been blocked. Satisfied, I put my phone away. Someone like Jake, a twisted psychopath, would only feel challenged if I let him go too easily. By making him believe I was reluctant, he'd sever ties more cleanly. The next day, Emily returned, her earlier gloom completely gone. She practically floated into the room, her face glowing with smug satisfaction. "Jake's mine now, sis," she said casually, tilting her head just enough to reveal a faint mark on her neck. "You should stop clinging to my boyfriend. Have some self-respect. Okay, he doesn't love you anymore. Even if you begged on your knees, it'd be useless." Her voice was light, but her words were venomous. She chuckled. "So what if you have $7 million? Once I marry into Jake's family, I'll have way more than that. Face it, you're just not as lucky as me." I watched her with a calm expression. Lucky? Being the girlfriend of a murderous psychopath? That's luck I wouldn't dare wish for myself. Later, my parents organized a graduation banquet for us. "Mom," Emily said with a dissatisfied tone, scanning the venue, "didn't you say this banquet was for both me and Emma? Look at the screen. It says top scorer banquet. And my score is smaller than hers. All this over just a few points? You're so biased." Now, my mom said gently, putting an arm around her. "Your dad insisted on making it a banquet for the top scorer. I couldn't change it in time. Don't be upset. Sweetie, once your acceptance letter arrives, I'll give you money to go on a trip. How about that?" Just then, relatives began arriving, congratulating my parents. "Raising two talented kids. You're so fortunate. Emma really brought you honor. State's top scorer. There are so few of them in the country. I've always said Emma was smart since she was a kid. You could just tell she'd succeed." Emily sneered. "You're all so old-fashioned. These days, money is all that matters. Being the state's top scorer? She'll still end up working for someone else." She glanced at our parents and added smugly, "I have a surprise for you all later." The room grew curious, and my mom looked puzzled. Before anyone could ask more, new guests arrived. Emily raised her arm high, calling out, "Jake, over here." The whispers started immediately. "Isn't that Jake? The son of Director Powell?" "Yes, the only child. Powell's a late father, so he spoils that boy endlessly. I heard they're hosting a graduation banquet for him soon too." "How does Emily know him so well?" "They look awfully close. Certainly more than classmates." Emily beamed, walking confidently to Jake's side. She grabbed his arm and smiled at everyone. "Let me introduce my boyfriend, Jake Powell." The room fell silent for 2 seconds before the guests swarmed forward. "So, you're Jake Powell. I dined with your father recently. How's Director Powell doing these days?" Jake smiled politely. "He's doing well. Thank you." Initially, my mom looked furious that Emily had openly brought a boyfriend to the banquet, but her expression quickly softened when she heard Jake's identity. "Jake, come sit at the head table. After Emily goes on stage, make sure you sit with her there." "Thank you, ma'am," Jake said politely, greeting everyone before his gaze finally landed on me. "I heard you're the state's top scorer," he said evenly, his tone giving nothing away. "Congratulations, Emma." My heart clenched. For a moment, I feared he might try to rekindle something, taking advantage of a brief moment alone. I whispered, "So, does this mean we can get back together?" The fleeting warmth in Jake's eyes turned cold in an instant. He sneered, "Not a chance. I'm Emily's boyfriend now. Emma, give up. Stop dreaming." With that, he walked past me to join Emily, leaving me behind. I popped a piece of candy into my mouth and muttered under my breath, "Idiot." That summer, Emily was busy flaunting her relationship with Jake, while I focused on investments and starting my business, using knowledge from my previous life and the advantage of foreknowledge. I made a small fortune in just 2 months. By the time my freshman year started, I was already ahead. I had quietly become somewhat wealthy. Initially, I intended to share some of my earnings with my parents. However, before transferring the money, I unintentionally overheard a conversation between my mom and Emily on the balcony. "Sweetheart, Of course. Mommy loves you the most. My mom said gently. Your sister earns so much money but refuses to share it. Don't worry. Your dad and I will coax her into giving us the money to buy you a new phone and a laptop. Okay. Emily leaned into her arms, sobbing pitifully. In the unlit balcony, my mom softly comforted her, her tone full of affection. You've always been smarter than your sister since you were little. A few extra points on the SAT mean nothing. You'll definitely achieve much more than her in the future. Emily cooed in a spoiled tone. Mom, ask Emma for more money. I want to go on a trip abroad. Of course. My little greedy one. My mom replied indulgently, stroking her hair. Now, go to bed. Be careful your sister doesn't overhear us. I stood quietly in the shadows, and the last traces of attachment I had to them evaporated completely. In my previous life, even with my 700 points, my parents only used my achievements to boast in public, while continuing to dote on Emily. I was a year older than her, but they delayed my schooling for a year just so I could look after her. This meant I attended the same grade and even the same classes as Emily. Over the years, I became little more than a responsible yet invisible backdrop in the family. Even when Emily dragged me off the rooftop in my previous life, I only heard my parents screaming her name. Before they came back inside, I quietly returned to my room. As expected, the next day, my mom held my hand with teary eyes. Emma, your dad's company isn't doing well, and we've spent so much on you and Emily's education. We're really strapped for cash now. Could you give us a few $100,000 to help out? I held her hand and said earnestly, Don't worry, Mom. This round of investments will pay off in 2 months. I'll transfer the money to you then. You're my parents, the most important people in my life. How could I not spend my earnings on our family? My mom hesitated but eventually agreed. I sighed. If Emily would sell the luxury gifts Jake gave her, that would help. She's still so young. Carrying designer bags is too flashy and could even bring trouble. Selling them could tide us over until the investment matures. That evening, I overheard a heated argument from Emily's room. Mom, are you crazy? Why did you sell my bag? Weren't you supposed to ask Emma for money? Jake will be furious when he finds out you sold the bag he gave me. The fight escalated before Emily slammed the door and stormed out. She didn't come back that night. Summer ended quickly. At the start of the new semester, I was chosen as the freshman representative to give a speech on stage. Emily sat in the front row, glaring at me with a mix of resentment, jealousy, and bitterness. But just as quickly as the emotions passed, she smiled, and I felt a sense of foreboding. As I walked on stage, I suddenly heard a loud ripping sound. My pants tore at the seam near the thigh, and whispers rippled through the crowd. Then I heard Emily's voice, deliberately loud. Oh no! Her pants ripped. Laughter broke out in the audience. Some looked embarrassed for me, while others frowned. If this had happened to the 18-year-old me in my previous life, I would have been mortified, frozen with humiliation. But I was no longer that girl. With a calm mind honed over 30 years of experience, I quickly pulled my shirt down to cover the tear and continued walking. A jacket was handed to me from the side, which I casually tied around my waist. Then, I delivered my speech with confidence and conviction. The audience of over 1,000 students, none of whom were ordinary, was soon captivated by my words. The minor incident was forgotten. Emily's childish schemes were still stuck in the mindset of our high school years. She hadn't anticipated that the audience's attention would shift back to my speech so quickly. With the perseverance of our generation, may we safeguard this prosperous era of China, I concluded, my voice ringing out. The applause was thunderous. As I stepped off the stage, I met Emily's hateful glare. I knew she had sabotaged my pants, but I had no intention of wasting my energy retaliating in the same petty way. That night, however, I ordered a seafood platter laced with a small dose of laxatives. I posted a picture of it on my social media, and it didn't take long for my mom to call. Emma, you don't even like seafood. Why not give it to your sister? She loves it. When you come home, I'll make you your favorite ribs. Okay. Pretending to pout, I replied, all right. Later, I watched Emily smugly take the seafood to her room. The next day, when my roommate returned to the dorm, she excitedly shared, Did you hear? A girl in the neighboring department had diarrhea while running the 800 meters today. I feigned surprise. On the track. Yeah, my roommate said, nodding. She was running, then suddenly yelled, "My stomach hurts," and bolted for the restroom. She didn't make it far before. Well, you know it happened. She shook her head. I was there at the time. I couldn't even eat lunch afterward. Our dorm was abuzz with chatter. Oh my God, that's so humiliating. If it were me, I don't think I could stay in school for the next 4 years. Not long after, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Emily. Emma, you did that on purpose, didn't you? Yeah, I replied, flipping through a book nonchalantly. You gave me a gift at the freshman assembly. I thought it was only fair to return the favor. Emily, I continued, my tone calm but firm. Focus on your relationship and stop messing with me. You can't win. Emily laughed coldly. Emma, you're doing all this because you're still hung up on Jake. Aren't you? It's pathetic. No matter what you do, Jake will never come back to you. Her tone grew increasingly contemptuous. He told me he finds you disgusting now. He hates clingy girls like you. It was as though she'd found an outlet for all her frustrations, and her mood instantly improved. So what if you're the state's top scorer? She sneered. We're still classmates, aren't we? So what if you have $7 million? Do you even understand the kind of power Jake's dad has as a director? After I graduate, I can marry Jake, and his family will pave the way for me. By the time you graduate, your money will probably be long gone. Her incessant ridicule was nothing more than the ramblings of someone narrow-minded. I shook my head and ended the call. No wonder she lives so gleefully. She's completely blind to reality. Before bed, I scrolled through social media. Emily's posts dominated my feed. Jake took me to the best Japanese restaurant today. Love you, baby. Who's jealous? Jake got me an LV bag. And then, feeling sick and tired today. So I went to bed early. I continued scrolling, only to see her latest update. Went night hiking with Jake to burn off some calories. The post included a photo of her smiling and making a peace sign at the camera. Jake stood next to her, his arm around her shoulder, wearing a faint smile. But his eyes were cold and unsettling, sending a chill down my spine. I scrolled further, half drowsy, and eventually fell asleep. When I woke up, her newest post had 2 photos. The first showed her sitting precariously on a cliff edge, striking a dramatic pose. The second showed Jake crouching next to her, tending to her ankle. Almost fell off the cliff and twisted my ankle. But thankfully my sweet boyfriend was there to take care of me. Seeing those familiar images jogged my memory. In my previous life, I'd seen similar posts from Daisy, the girl Jake dated after me. Back then, Jake had also taken her night hiking. Daisy had nearly fallen off the cliff, but Jake had caught her in time, leaving her with nothing more than a twisted ankle. As Jake later admitted, he had originally planned to push her off that night, but there had been people nearby, so he backed out at the last minute. It seemed that after Emily stole Jake from me, all the misfortunes meant for Daisy had transferred to her. How poetic. But I had no intention of warning her. Even if I told her, she wouldn't believe me. She'd just think I was jealous and trying to take Jake back. Besides, being siblings didn't mean much when she tried to kill me twice in my past life. I chose to let her deal with her own karma. Meanwhile, I was busy founding a startup with a few upperclassmen. I knew from my past life that these people would go on to achieve incredible things in the business world. I had capital, years of experience from my previous life, and an informational advantage. They had talent and vision. Together, our studio flourished. Within a year, the $7 million I started with had more than doubled, and my academics didn't suffer either. As for Emily, she initially attended classes diligently, but her foundation was weak. And without the system's help, her actual SAT level knowledge was probably around 300 points. She often seemed lost in class, her mind clouded with confusion. Worse still, she threw herself entirely into her relationship with Jake, neglecting her studies completely. One day, a former high school classmate sent me a link. Emma, isn't this your sister? Curious, I clicked on it and was met with an eye-popping scene. Emily was dressed provocatively, making suggestive gestures in front of a camera. Although the video only showed half her face, it was unmistakably her. I forced myself to watch the entire clip. Memories of something I'd heard in my past life about Daisy surfaced. Something I had dismissed as mere rumor. Submission testing. Jake, being the twisted psychopath he was, reportedly enjoyed breaking down his girlfriend's boundaries. He would coerce them into making compromising videos under the guise of proving their loyalty. Over time, the videos would grow more explicit, eroding their self-respect piece by piece until they were completely subservient. In my past life, I had brushed off these stories as baseless gossip. Now, they seemed horrifyingly true. Emily was clearly no stranger to this behavior. Her wardrobe had become increasingly bold, clearly tailored to Jake's preferences. I'd even heard she was publicly reprimanded by a professor for her inappropriate attire. As I scrolled through more of her videos, my frown deepened. What's the point of being reborn if you're still the same greedy, self-destructive Emily as before? Without the system's $7 million reward, her life boiled down to a useless degree she might not even graduate with. Jake was the sole source of her materialistic fulfillment. She'd lost her sense of self entirely, leaving behind only a string of luxury goods and empty social media posts. Right before finals, my mom called me. "Emma, your exams are coming up soon, right?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm working on practice problems right now," I replied absent-mindedly. "Why? Can you take your sister's exams for her?" "What?" I froze, the pen in my hand stopping mid-stroke. Sensing my shock, my mom tried to sound nonchalant. "Your sister said she's been struggling this semester. If she fails her classes, she might not pass even with a retake. But you're so smart, Emma. For you, it'd be easy, even without studying." "No," I said firmly. Getting caught impersonating someone could result in expulsion. "It won't happen," she quickly countered. "You and Emily look so much alike. Add some bangs, and no one will recognize you. Come on, you're her sister. Can't you help her out?" By now, I was immune to their favoritism, but the absurdity of her request still struck me. "This isn't happening. Emma, please. She needs you," my mom pleaded. I hung up. She called back several more times, but I rejected each one. Finally, she sent me a text. "Mom is really disappointed in you. Other sisters care for and spoil their younger siblings. How could you be so heartless? Do you think you're a good sister?" I typed back quickly. "If you think you're so qualified to be a sister, why don't we switch? I'll be her mom, and you can be her sister." The phone buzzed with a series of voice messages. I didn't bother listening to them. Instead, I muted the conversation and returned to my studies. Since I refused to help, Emily found someone else to take her exams for her. Predictably, they were caught. All her grades for the semester were nullified, and the school was deliberating further punishment. That night, Emily stormed into my dorm room. The moment she saw me, she raised her hand to slap me. "Emma, you did this on purpose, didn't you? You wanted to see me fail." I caught her wrist mid-air and smirked. "Not bad. If you get expelled, I'll be even more satisfied." She yanked her arm away and pulled out a water bottle from her bag. My stomach sank. I quickly called my roommates to help restrain her. One of them snatched the bottle away just in time. "What's in this?" my roommate asked, frowning. "It's not acid, is it? Emma, your sister wouldn't go that far." "Right." I held Emily down and sneered. "She's capable of anything. Call the police." "Mia." The police arrived quickly, and we were all taken to the station to give statements. When I returned to campus, I went straight to the administration office and handed over links to Emily's videos that had been circulating online. Recently, Emily had started showing her face more frequently in her videos. Some users had already identified her as a student at our university, sparking heated discussions in the comments. "She's from here? A top student acting like this? No wonder everyone fights so hard to get into our school. LOL. My respect for this university just hit a new low. The administration took the matter seriously. Combined with her cheating scandal, attempted assault, and the public uproar over her videos, Emily's academic career was effectively over. She was expelled and detained by the police. My parents bombarded me with calls, but I ignored them. I knew they would only blame me for reporting Emily or accuse me of not protecting her. I had no intention of returning to that house. During the break, I focused on self-study and growing my startup. Emily, after her release, went back to our hometown. As the new year approached, I received devastating news. My grandmother had passed away. How could it happen so suddenly? I asked, my voice trembling. I immediately booked a flight home. While packing, my hands shook uncontrollably. This was the grandmother who used to sneak me treats wrapped in layers of wax paper, whispering, "These are just for you." The one who cried and hugged me tightly when she learned I was the state's top scorer, telling me how proud she was of my hard work. The only person in my family who had ever truly cared for me. According to my aunt, my grandmother had passed away peacefully in her sleep. The night before, she had been talking about me. "It's been so long since I've seen Emma," she had said. "I wonder how she's doing at school. Is she eating well? Has she lost weight again? That child is always so considerate, always putting others before herself. When she comes home for break, I'll make her favorite pork ribs." But she never got to see me come home. When I arrived, she was already a black and white photograph on the wall, fighting back tears. I knelt down and bowed 3 times, then lit incense for her. At over 90 years old, her passing was considered a happy funeral. The family hired performers to sing opera, and the house was lively with guests. I stood watching the commotion when I noticed someone at the edge of the crowd. Emily. She was standing in the shadows, her eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. It was the same cold, vengeful look she'd had in our previous life. Right before she pushed me off the rooftop, I coldly averted my gaze. After the funeral, my parents tried to reconcile with me, but I ignored them and checked into a hotel. That evening, there was a knock at my door. "Who is it?" "It's me, sweetie," came my aunt's voice. Only then did I feel safe enough to open the door. But as soon as my aunt stepped inside, my parents followed right behind her, unaware of everything that had transpired between us. My aunt thought I was merely sulking. She started to gently persuade me. "Emma, your parents really miss you. They know you're upset and even brought your favorite pastries to see you. We're all family. How could there be a grudge that lasts overnight?" "Right." I frowned, not wanting to offend my aunt, and stayed silent. My parents smiled sheepishly as they handed me a red bean pastry. "Emma, try some. You used to love these," my dad said. I glanced at it briefly. "I don't like it," I replied flatly. I only ate these because Emily didn't like red beans, and it was all I could have. But I hate red beans. Always have. The room grew tense. Suddenly, there was another knock at the door. My dad, standing near it, didn't even ask who it was before opening it. The next second, someone rushed inside. Emily. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she looked utterly disheveled. In her hand was a knife. "Why?" she shouted. "Why do you get everything? You have money, an education, and all I have is Jake. Why did he even leave me?" She raised the knife high, her movements frenzied. "Emma, this has to end. Once we start over again, I'll live better than you." I grabbed her wrist tightly as my aunt tried desperately to pull her away. My parents stood frozen, shouting, "Emily, what are you doing? Put down the knife. Don't be impulsive." But Emily was beyond reasoning. Using all my strength, I managed to push her away. The door was too far, so I dragged my aunt into the bathroom and locked the door behind us. I finally exhaled in relief. "Auntie, call the police." Still shaken, my aunt dialed with trembling hands. "Emma, your parents are still out there. They'll be fine," I interrupted. "Her target is me. She won't hurt them." Outside, I could hear Emily kicking the bathroom door and screaming. Only now did my parents try to restrain her. "Emily, stop. You were already in detention once. If you keep this up." "Don't stop me," she shrieked. The mention of detention seemed to agitate her further. In a low, eerie voice, she muttered, "If I die with her one more time, I'll get to choose again. This time, I'll take the $7 million and become the top scorer myself." My mom was on the verge of tears. "Choose? What are you talking about? Emily, calm down." She turned to my dad. "Do something. Stop her." A piercing scream rang out from outside the bathroom. My heart sank. Something terrible had happened. I heard my mom's panicked voice. Honey, are you okay? There's so much blood. Then came the sound of something heavy collapsing. Emily's voice followed, trembling. Dad, I didn't mean to. I didn't know. What shocked me the most was my mom's response. Instead of tending to my dad, she shouted at Emily, Run! What are you still doing here? I'll take him to the hospital. They've already called the police. Without hesitation, Emily fled. I immediately called for an ambulance. When I opened the door, my dad was lying in a pool of blood, a stab wound in his thigh. Taking a deep breath, I crouched down and checked for a pulse. There was none. My legs felt weak, and I struggled to stand. My mom, seeing the look on my face, froze in disbelief. That's impossible. Emily only accidentally stabbed his leg, not his heart. How could he die so quickly? She didn't realize that severing a major artery in the leg could lead to rapid blood loss and death. Still clinging to denial, she collapsed over his body, sobbing. Suddenly, she picked up the blood-stained knife from the floor and, with shaking hands, thrust it toward me. Emma, help your sister just this once. Okay. Even my aunt was stunned. Sister-in-law, do you realize what you're saying? This is murder. Murder carries the death penalty. It won't, my mom cried, approaching me with the knife. Emma, I'll write a statement of forgiveness. She won't get the death penalty. Please. You can just say you didn't mean to do it, my mom sobbed. At most, you'll only serve a few years. Your sister is still young. We spoiled her too much growing up. She wouldn't survive in there. But you could. You're strong even if you go to prison. You'll come out and still have a good life. I stared at her coldly, the last thread of hope I had for her snapping completely. Dad is lying there dying, and all you can think about is protecting your precious daughter? I'm capable, so I deserve to be sacrificed. The hotel was close to the police station, and by the time she finished speaking, the officers had already broken in. My dad had stopped breathing before the ambulance could even arrive. Emily's frantic, unintentional stab had severed a major artery in his leg, and within seconds, blood sprayed everywhere, painting the floor red. Emily fled and remained missing, but my mother adamantly insisted to the police that the stabbing had been my fault and had nothing to do with Emily. Unfortunately for her, my aunt refused to lie, and the knife bore only Emily's and my mother's fingerprints. Emily's capture came quickly, not through a police pursuit or voluntary surrender, but because she was taken to the hospital. In her panic, unsure of where to go or what to do, she turned to the only person she thought could save her, Jake. Jake, upon learning of her crime, first comforted her gently, promising he'd take care of everything. He reassured her until she let her guard down, and then, in an instant, he pushed her out the 8th-floor window. Standing by the window, he watched her as her expression shifted from shock to confusion, terror, and finally regret. Later, Jake admitted that he'd intended to make it look like Emily had committed suicide while drunk. What he hadn't accounted for was that a tree on the 2nd floor broke her fall. Emily survived, but the impact left her paralyzed from the neck down. She was rushed to the hospital, where she clung to life by a thread, unable to move anything below her neck. She could only breathe with the help of machines. My mother stayed by her side, crying at her bedside every day. When Emily finally woke up, the words she repeated most often were, kill me so I can start over. I'll pick $7 million this time. I won't live like this. Her voice grew hoarse with constant screams. Kill me. I want to restart. I want the system to save me. But the system never came for her again. No one did. 3 years passed. Emily's condition showed no improvement. She lay in bed, her body wasting away, her skin covered in bed sores. Over time, my mother's patience eroded. No longer did she hold out hope for her favorite daughter's recovery. She became rough and impatient when feeding Emily, shoving dry rice into her mouth without care, causing her to choke and gag. On bad days, she would mutter bitterly, "Why are you still alive to burden me? You should have just died back then." She stopped cleaning Emily's body regularly. My aunt, who visited once out of pity, told me with horror how Emily's entire body was covered in festering sores. Lifting the blanket was a sight she couldn't forget. Emily's once bright eyes were now dull, staring blankly at the ceiling. her mouth occasionally murmuring, "Kill me. I'll pick $7 million. I want to restart." But there was no restart. The system was silent. No one came to save her. Over the years, my mother tried to contact me many times, but I never agreed to see her. Losing her husband, without income, she resorted to odd jobs to support herself and care for her bedridden daughter. Years of toil wore her body down rapidly. She sought out relatives to convince me to help, resorting to emotional blackmail. But I wasn't moved. If it had only been about the unfair treatment I'd suffered as a child, I might have felt some responsibility to take care of her in her old age. But when she didn't hesitate to accuse me of my father's murder to protect Emily, I knew the bond between us as mother and daughter was severed forever. On my 25th birthday, I received a call late at night from an unfamiliar number. A voice, hoarse and frail, spoke on the other end. "Emma, it's Mom. Please don't hang up." Her voice trembled. "Happy birthday. It's been 4 years since I've seen you. Can't you forgive me?" I stayed silent. "You're both my children," she continued, her voice breaking. "I love you both. I made mistakes in how I showed it. Please, Emma, are you done?" I asked coldly. I replied calmly, "You must have the wrong person. My mother died 4 years ago." That statement seemed to pierce her. On the other end of the line, she suddenly burst into sobs. "Emma, Mom was wrong. I was so wrong." I hung up without hesitation, feeling nothing but indifference. Perhaps even a sense of relief. How could I forgive her? Forgive her for keeping me home an extra year so I could attend school with Emily? Forgive her for feeding me only the bread Emily didn't like? Or making me wear her ill-fitting hand-me-downs? Forgive her for begging me to take Emily's exams? For asking me to take the blame for Emily's crimes? Even if I could forgive the child who suffered through years of unfairness and neglect, I could never forgive the woman who betrayed me so deeply. By the time I graduated, the studio I had co-founded had grown into a full-fledged company and was on the verge of going public. My sharp investment instincts had earned me a stellar reputation in the industry, and my future was brighter than ever. Once, while my mother wasn't home, I went back to visit Emily. She was unrecognizable, a shadow of her former self, muttering incoherently, fragments of phrases escaping her lips. "Emma, restart, choose again." Those disjointed words were likely the last remaining thread of hope in her bleak existence. Yet, as I looked at her, I realized she still hadn't understood. Her downfall wasn't the result of making the wrong choice. It was her greed, her insatiable desires, her cruelty, all of which had long been entwined with her very nature. Her mistakes were woven into the fabric of who she was. Even if she could start over 1,000 times, the outcome would always be the same. The problem wasn't her choices. It was her soul. The room was stifling, the air thick with heat and the stench of decay. I left quickly. Outside, the sun was warm, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of flowers. I pulled out my phone to check the date and smiled slightly. It was time to finalize an investment in a mobile game, one I knew would soon become wildly popular. Onward. Always onward.